Sophie, thank you so much for joining me today on the Honest Postnatal podcast. I know we had to delay it a little bit. I think you were trying to get your two little girls to bed, and I actually was just, my two little boys were going mental. So hopefully, is everything okay now to start?
Yeah, I mean, we're 3 years into having two, and I feel like I still haven't quite mastered putting both to bed when it's just me at bedtime. So, but yeah, they're both asleep, thankfully. So thanks for pushing the time a bit.
No, you're welcome. I mean, yeah, we've got two, and I've got a third one on the way, and I don't think you ever get used to it. Like, it's just so hard, and bedtimes just for me, seems to be that absolute like chaos, and they never want to go to bed ever.
No, my 6-year-old is particularly gifted at sort of coming up with all kinds of reasons why she's not tired, not going to bed, and yeah, she has us sort of wrapped around her finger. So,
It's the distraction techniques. And I suppose that was why I wanted to talk to you when you just said your 6-year old. I'm going to check with you, but I think it was your first child that led you to found MamaMade. And that was how I found you, through your meals, actually. And so that's why I wanted to speak to you today, because to me, it's incredibly important that women are in business, that can open businesses when they're mothers. But I think it's something that a lot of us don't talk about, and how kind of hard it can be. So do you want to maybe just introduce yourself a little bit? Actually, that might be really helpful for the listeners.
yeah, sure. So I had a business, as you rightfully pointed out, called MamaMade, which was a child nutrition brand. I started it when, yeah, my daughter, who's now 6, when I was weaning her, just feeling like there was such an opportunity for better products, better nutrition, better support. Um, and it was an amazing, amazing process to kind of see that business come to life. It wasn't something I ever pictured myself doing, but I think I was on mat leave from my kind of day job, let's say, and the idea of going back to work and doing something that was maybe not as exciting or as fulfilling as I kind of wanted my career to be, or like justifying that time away from my child, but at the same time wanting to do something that would feel challenging and fulfilling. So yeah, starting my own business and running my own business was honestly like the best experience, and I feel so grateful for it. And anytime any women ask me about it, just so encouraging, but obviously it has its challenges as well. But no, looking back, I feel so grateful that it was something I took the what's the word, took the plunge, like went for it, just did it. Yeah.
And when you say you took the plunge, so how old was your first daughter when you started, or like when you had the concept of the business and the idea started to grow?
So I guess I had the concept when she was around, when we were weaning, around maybe 7 or 8 months, when it starts to be a bit more like, okay, I need to do this every day. She's having regular meal times. But it took another year, yeah, about a year after that until we actually launched. And even then, when I launched, it was just sort of slowly on Instagram. So the whole process was really slow, trying to figure out what I was actually doing, what the product was, what the opportunity was. And when she was that bit older and in nursery more is when I really went for it. I was very lucky at the time. My bosses at my day job were extremely supportive, and they kind of let me work on it on the side while I was still working with them at the desk. So yeah, so I guess we launched properly when she was about 2. And yeah, I stopped being involved with the business as of last March. So when she was about 5. So yeah, about 4 years in the making.
And in that 4 years, you had another baby as well?
Yeah, I had my son Arthur
Okay.
when let's see. That was when everything was sort of picking up. That was in 2020 during one of the lockdowns.
Oh gosh,
I
okay.
had so the whole thing feels like a fever dream. Um, Running the business, giving birth. And it was really like I think we started raising money for the business when I was pregnant, and I remember we had got the last signature on one of the agreements at my 20-week scan. Um, And so, yeah, we had just gotten all this money in, and then he was born, what, 4 months later or so.
And how did that feel? Because that must have been kind of really exciting, but at the same time, I can't imagine like the juggle of having one child already, who was presumably like a toddler, then being pregnant as well, and being like the CEO of your company. So how did you manage all of that?
Yeah, I was sort of naively optimistic that I could do it all. Like, my daughter was in nursery. I felt like, oh, how hard is a newborn? I can just kind of like hold him while I'm doing emails and calls and things. And that was true. Like the baby was easy enough, but I really underestimated how depleted I would be from birth and from the whole pregnancy. And I was overdue with him, so it was an extra long pregnancy, and he was really big at birth, and it was not a straightforward birth, and I really didn't account in any way for that to be an outcome. And so I had him over Christmas, and I would say we got that kind of downtime between then and the new year, which was amazing. But then the new year started again, and it was like, employees looking to me for answers, and my husband, who's partners with me in business, looking to me to join calls and have answers. And I really wish I had just anticipated a bit more that I would need more support in the business to allow me that time really to recuperate. I'm very grateful I had a very straightforward birth with my first, and I felt really good after it. And I just would have naively thought it would be fine. And I just really was so depleted. Um, I mean, he's 3 and I feel like I'm still recovering, so that should say something.
Which happens. Like I speak to women a lot about how pregnancy is 9 months, and there's this whole thing about like it's 9 months baby in, 9 months to recover, but actually the research shows that it takes 2 years for your body to
Really?
recover. Yeah, 2 years for your body to recover from pregnancy and birth. And that's from, that research is based on a very normal, what would be termed as like an easy good birth. So if you've had a slightly difficult birth as well, it does deplete you. And I think that is the thing. And especially, and it's something I want to speak to you about later, but the UK and the US difference. But, I think in the UK, there's not enough recognition on what happens to mums and how long it can take your body to recover, and things like nutrition and supplements. And so, yeah, being depleted from a difficult birth and then trying to run a business as well must have been so draining on you in kind of in every, circumstance.
Yeah. No, it was a really funny time looking back on it. I think I just was not really just didn't prepare myself, I think, for the kind of brain differences, the brain fog. Your mind's just not, I wasn't in this like fight mode that I think you really need to be in. Um, and there was definitely a moment when I got more support in. I think, um, we ended up hiring a nanny quite early on, who was looking after him in our home. And that gave me a bit more time and space to like be um, working, but still having that ability to be near him. So it ended up actually being this like really ideal situation. Um, and then my husband was like, "Oh, you're back! Like you're back. You can see that you're a bit snappier, like you're a bit more on it." But that was, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 months in. Like I for those first 4 or 5 months, it was like walking through molasses. It was just like sludge. I could not get my brain to be quick the way that it needed to be to run a business. So yeah, that was just pure willpower. And the truth is, because I wasn't prepared, the team wasn't prepared. And so I think that was one of the bigger mistakes I made, because if I could do it again, I would have really energized my team and empowered the team around my maternity leave. I would have taken maternity leave. I would have empowered more people to take on more. And I think that's just something that I personally have had to deal with. I think it's probably not too uncommon for women, of that kind of, how do you ask for help? How do you bring the help in? How do you identify what help you need? Um, I was still relatively sort of immature when it came to that, or just not not aware enough of how to do that.
But I think if you said you had, quite a good straightforward first birth and quite a good recovery, then, in your head, you were obviously kind of planning the same thing. So it's quite difficult if you had different experience to have like planned forwards for that, isn't it? I mean, I listened to another podcast actually where you were interviewed. I think it was an American lady talking about birth stories, and you spoke about your first. Are you happy to talk a little bit about your second birth in terms of then like how it affected your recovery?
Yeah, of course. I mean, yes, my first birth was really textbook in that way. My second birth was, I really thought I was going to be having a home birth. That was sort of what I was preparing for, because I'd had this just incredible experience with my first, and I was sort of bought into this whole, natural birth movement, and I really wanted it to be at home, partly because of the pandemic, and um, I was really overdue. And I had this gut feeling that I had a really big baby because it was very heavy in a way that I didn't have with my first.
Okay.
Um, but with the pandemic, I don't know, I was always being passed on to this person, that person, and it didn't feel like anyone was really monitoring me as closely as I should be. But at the same time, I was under the home birth team, which was very like, you can birth your baby, you won't birth a baby that's too big. Um, anyway, and I that's another topic. But yeah, Christmas Eve 2020, we went back into lockdown. The ambulance services were no longer available for home births, so all home births were canceled.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
and so, yeah, the home birth team was basically like, if you go into labor, you go into the hospital. At that point, I think I was close to 2 weeks overdue, so I sort of was just like, screw this, I'm going to get
Yeah.
induced. I'm so over this.
Oh my God, 42 weeks. It's such
Yeah,
like
I was.
Ethan, my first one was 42 weeks, and it's so long, isn't it? Like those last few weeks just kill you.
It meant I wasn't prepared for how draining that weight would be. I
Yes.
was also early with my first, and I knew I was big with my second. I just in no planet thought I'd be going overdue with him. I was just
Yeah.
um anyway, I ended up getting induced, which was the induction itself was actually fine, was straightforward. I didn't they did their best to keep me in the birth center. I had the balloon induction, but it was just one of those things where things weren't going that well. I had to get transferred to labor ward. And as soon as I got transferred to the labor ward, it was like I was in this tiny room with a shared bathroom and there was just like monitors bleeping. It was just like, oh, this is not the environment. But I ended up having something called shoulder dystocia with him, which is a really rare
Okay. Yeah.
complication where the shoulder basically gets stuck in the pelvis trying to come out.
Hmm.
As my sister, who's an obstetrician, will tell me that is literally a worst case scenario. Thankfully, he was fine. And I was actually, physically more or less fine. I ended up delivering him normally, but yeah, it was just the whole thing was just physically quite demanding, I guess. And then he was over 10 pounds. So he was
Oh
over
gosh.
4.5 kilos when he was born. I think there was just a lot of feeling let down as well by the system that hadn't been picked up, and that no one was really kind of. And then it was the pandemic as well, so my husband was sort of out within an hour and a half. So the whole thing was just sort of not a great experience. But I was very obviously happy that I'd had a healthy baby, and yeah, no doubt about that. But I think physically, I just found maybe probably on top. It was sort of at that point we'd been in lockdown for what? How many
A long
months?
time.
Half a year? Yeah.
Yeah.
Half a year, it was just like, I was so emotionally just done, I think, by the time he was born. And realizing that how close to worst case outcome I'd been with my birth, I think is something I'm still sort of processing in some ways.
Yeah. I mean, I think all of us that had COVID babies, it was a very difficult time, wasn't it? I mean, I look back now and it does feel quite kind of not trauma inducing, but to think about everything that went on. And I think the way women were treated and giving birth, and to hear that you couldn't have the home birth that you'd planned, just it's so distressing to think that that was put in place. I think women were so much more affected than other parts of society in terms of like giving birth. Um, How did it affect you mentally as well then when you got home with baby? Did it feel like it affected kind of bonding or anything like that?
So I bonded with him straight away. Actually in a way that I didn't experience with my daughter. I don't know if that's because he's my second, maybe because it was a complicated birth. I was in this honestly in this amazing newborn bubble that I didn't really experience my first time. And all I wanted to do was like hold him and nurse him and not answer emails. I was like I was like in my nightgown all day. I was like in bed. I was like, you can bring me my laptop, but I'm not working. And no, it was honestly it was incredible. I have oddly just like really nice memories of those first days with him. It was also, that week between Christmas and New Year, which is just a
Yeah.
naturally quiet time. So we weren't getting like loads of things happening at work. So no, I mean, despite the birth itself, once we were home, it all felt very relaxed and quite happy. And I think that was probably part of the difficulty of being like, oh my God, I have to go back to this business that I started, that I raised money for, when I just want to be holding my baby,
Yeah.
which I definitely never had with my first. Um,
And what
yeah.
was the plan? So I know you said you felt like you weren't prepared. So you thought you were going to have baby and it would be fine. Like you could just hold him, you could type out your emails. Is that genuinely like what you were thinking would occur?
Genuinely, it's what I was thinking would occur. Yeah. I
I
just thought,
think
oh
that's
no,
quite reasonable.
like, yeah, it's not how he can't be harder than a 3-year-old at that point. I thought it'll be fine, it'll be relaxed.
I think to be fair, once you've got like I think once you've had another one and you see the toddler stage and you're like, oh, that's what I wasn't prepared for. You do think like the you see a newborn and you're like, God, they just sleep. Actually, that is the easy bit. So I think actually thinking that you could do emails is completely justifiable. When you're saying that you would go back and change it, so maybe for other mums that are listening that have got businesses and they're planning a second child, like what would you have put in place if you could, if you could go back and change it now? What would have been helpful as a new mum?
I think part of my problem was seeing myself as somewhat irreplaceable in the business because I
Yes.
was leading it. And I think if I were to do it again, I would really understand what my function is in the business and what my role is, and then find cover for those. There's always going to be some element, obviously, as a business owner, business leader, that is irreplaceable, but there's a lot that you do that can be covered for. So I think there's partly that. There's finding literally maternity cover, even if it's for 2 months or 1 month, just finding, and if even if it's from within the team, just understanding what jobs can be taken over. Um, being
So you
really
had no maternity cover set up for yourself?
no, I genuinely was like, I will
Okay.
be back at work on Monday. I will be fine. I mean, that's how naive I was. Um,
I love
I
it though. I don't think naive. I think it's like you're a strong woman, you're powerful. Like I love that. I think that that's just really, and you obviously, it's your business is your baby. Like I know that it's a different baby, but I think and especially because to me, like listening to you, it was so inherent also being a mum. Like
yeah,
so I think all of the roles are so blended. So I can see again how you wouldn't have thought that. But thinking about how if you'd been an employee with another company, you'd be like, yes, let's find maternity cover for 9 months. So it's interesting, isn't it, how that it plays out and everything.
100%. Yeah, no, and I do think that I would have really included the team more. So kind of really communicated more with the team, set expectations for like, things might not go well and this is what it's going to look like if I do need extra time to rest and recover. Like, um, I was really afraid to kind of show that vulnerability, I think, to the team. I was really keen to prove that I could do everything, don't worry, this is just a baby, it's not a big deal. And I wish I had really kind of created more space for it, because I think that's also a nice opportunity as a business, like from a cultural point of view, to really make space for people's big life events, and understand how that can take someone away from work or from that being their focus for a period of time. um, so I think the way I approached it, yeah, I really do wish I'd done that. So I think for anyone listening who might be thinking about that, I think, um, being open with your team and making that a kind of moment to instill the kind of brand values or company values across the board.
And did you have many other women working for you? Because again, I'm just thinking, it's MamaMade in the name. It was all about being mums. It was about feeding your children and being a working mum. So did you have many other mothers working for you?
So funny enough, at that time, we had other women, but not mothers,
Okay.
and quite young as well. I mean, we were a new startup, so we were sort of having to budget, and that kind of meant we had quite a junior team. And we actually saw almost a full turnover of the marketing team during my the first 4 or 5 months of my mat leave, and I think that was a real wake up moment for me of like, wow, if everyone's leaving, something went really wrong here. And then, as we rebuilt the team, that was something that I felt strongly about prioritizing, was hiring people who have families or have some, not maturity, that's not the word, but yeah, some understanding, I think, of what this product is in real
Hmm.
terms. And so I'm really proud of then the team that we grew after that point. I'm proud of the whole team before, don't get me wrong. Like they did incredible work, and I feel really bad that I sort of let them down in that way. Um, but yeah, I think seeing where we then went as we grew bigger and bigger, um, that was definitely, I think by the time I left in March, I think our team was entirely parents. I don't think there was a single person on the team who wasn't a parent. Um, I think we had one person who wasn't a parent, and then she gave birth, over the course of her working for us. So yeah, I think it was at one point 100% parents.
Because I think that just makes a difference, doesn't it? So that when you've had a baby, if you've got parents who are working there, they completely understand. Whereas I think if you've got a whole team that haven't experienced birth and children and, and the ways it can pull you away from work, then it's a different environment. And you're maybe having to explain that more than you would do to a team of parents that get that, like, the nursery might call because your child's sick and you've got to go and pick them up, and that means you can't attend the meeting. So I think it's interesting to find out, yeah, what kind of team you had around you at that time.
Yeah. And it's like we're all guilty of it, right? Like I feel like I was guilty of it before becoming a mom, of being like, oh, why, can't you get it together? But
Yeah.
these things just pull you in every direction.
Yeah, definitely. And what was the hardest thing you found as, like, being a CEO or having your own company, being a founder and being a mum at the same time?
I think it's as you've just pointed out, like you're pulled in every direction, and because the business is essentially a baby to you, kind of figuring out that prioritization within the family as well. I think that feeling of like always letting someone down, whether that was reality or not, but that mental gymnastics of kind of that balance, was definitely challenging. But then when it worked, it was the most empowering feeling, like when it was really all in flow, and like I had the right people helping me with the kids, and I had the great team at work, and I really felt like, wow, this is amazing. Like this is what I want to keep chasing, this feeling of just feeling completely empowered to do it all. Not do it all, but feel like I'm really fulfilled by the things that I'm doing in my life. Um so yeah, it definitely was challenging to find that balance, but getting the right, like, childcare in place, the right team in place in the company made such a huge difference.
And was that something, so I'm just thinking, like, the way you're talking about it, and it was empowering and everything, is that something you saw from your childhood? Because I'm just wondering, was that also something that you wanted to show your children, like a working mom and she could have her own business and she could kind of do it all? Is that something you grew up with, or like where did that come from?
Um yeah, funny enough, I mean, I don't know if I ever dreamt of like entrepreneurship in that way. My mother is an entrepreneur, but we were in high school. We were teenagers when
Okay.
she started her business. Um, I grew up around really tough women. My mom's mom was I mean, she was just incredible. Um, and so I think also I'm one of three girls, so we were only sisters in my family, and I think
Okay.
my parents really drilled into us that feeling of, you can be and do anything and anything's possible, which is really nice. Um, And so I don't think I was something I necessarily like always aspired to, but when I had the idea for it, I feel very grateful that I came from it from a headspace of like I can do anything, I can make anything work. Um, so I guess that was more where it came from. And it's never really occurred to me that I wouldn't have a career, just because I've always been sort of ambitious and driven. So yeah, I suppose not having a career was never something I thought about. And then once I had the idea for the business, I just wanted to do that. So I don't know if it was as conscious as that, but yeah.
Yeah. And then I think I saw on your Instagram, obviously when you've left MamaMade and you moved on, the difference of going from being a working mum and this mum that had her own company to then basically, or I shouldn't say basically, being a stay-at-home mum, but the difference and like, how did you find that, mentally? Because I think that can be a massive shift for mums.
I'm just getting into a flow with it, and it's been like 9 months. I think when you have your own business and your own company, or if you're working, any number of days a week and looking after kids, the amount of juggling constantly I was just constantly doing something.
Yes.
And then I found myself in a position where I was still busy. It was just such a different kind of busy that it actually felt like I was doing nothing. And so I would go to bed at the end of the day feeling like I've done nothing today. And I'll still have days of being like, I've got nothing going on tomorrow except for like, ABCD. It's like all these things that are more, you know, more concerned around the kids, things that I wasn't doing before because I was outsourcing them. Now I'm the one doing them. And um, yeah, it definitely has its like peaks of feeling amazing that I get to look after my kids and I'm able to do this and this is my life and I feel very grateful that I have them and that I'm in a position where I can do this. Um but yeah, also feelings of like wanting to go to bed, feeling that kind of mental exhaustion almost that you feel from when you're working and from when you've been having a career and leading a business. So yeah, I don't they're both so challenging and it's just about what suits you. And I definitely feel like I'm better suited to a career, but I'm also enjoying the challenge that this sort of quieter period in my life is presenting.
Is it quieter with the two of them?
It's quieter in the sense that like I'm only managing them. Like, before we had a team of 20. So it is kind of nice not to be managing a lot of other people, but no, it's busy in a different way. And like I've taken on like I'm my daughter's class rep this year, which like
Oh,
I
I did that
never
last year.
which I never would have done. I would have been like, sorry, I'm too busy. Um, but now I'm doing it. And it's sort of this, you can get very sucked into school politics as well.
Yes.
I get the PTA mom thing in a much different way now. Um, no, it's really, it's just, yeah, my hours are different. It's just different. Like I'm really busy between the hours of, 3 and 8:30, but between the hours of 9 and 3, it's a different rhythm. So it's just, yeah, sort of rambling on a bit, but I'm finding my way. The initial change was a huge shock to the system.
I can imagine. Yeah. Yes, because two different worlds, isn't it? Running your own business and then looking after your own children, it's just two completely different things. But I think they're both equally as demanding. And you've got all of I want to say like, you've got HR and then you've got HR of your children because it's trying to like negotiate the disputes, isn't it? And stuff that goes on. So I feel like there's probably a lot of parallels, but just in separate worlds. I feel like from talking to you, this won't be the last business you do. Um, is there anything you're working on at the moment? I'm not sure what you can talk about or kind of what your plans are or what you're thinking.
I'm really just taking kind of each day as it comes. I'm trying really hard to not overwork this period. Like I'm in this sort of downtime and I'm getting to a place now where I want to just kind of see what happens, like by saying yes to things and saying coming on podcasts and speaking to people and just meeting other women. And I think something that interests me as a kind of like issue is how many women of who have kids in school are finding themselves either like very lost career-wise or feeling very unfulfilled career-wise, because of the concessions that you do have to make when you have school-age kids. And not everyone does, but I'm coming across so many women who do, and it's something that I'm sort of chewing over. I think is that kind of like, how can we address this, because it seems quite widespread, the number of women I speak to who just feel so incredibly like unfulfilled by what they're doing. But other than that, I'm just sort of figuring it out. nothing
Okay.
nothing major in the works yet.
I feel like there will be something very exciting coming from you in the future. But I think that's really interesting what you're saying, because I think it is so difficult. And I think in the UK as well, we've got the massive issue with childcare costs, and I know that so many women, you either work to pay the school fees, the nursery fees, the nanny fees, and then you're literally just back at baseline, or sometimes you're even lower than that. Or yes, you decide to stay at home because it works out cheaper, but then you feel like you put your career on hold. So I think it's a massive area where a lot of women do feel really frustrated and kind of held back. How do you feel it differs to the US? And I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I've heard that maternity leave can range from like 6 weeks that you can be back at, depending on then what company you work for. I mean, that to me sounds crazy.
Yeah, no, it is. There's actually no legal requirement to have maternity leave is the first thing.
Gosh.
So women will use a mix of like disability leave, um, vacation leave. I mean, there's like all kinds of combinations to get that maternity leave. But yeah, I know. I mean, my sister was a doctor, and she had 5 weeks, I think, and
Wow.
one of those weeks, her son was in the NICU. So it's cruel, when you think about it in light of what we get here. And my other sister just had a baby, and she's also, probably going to go back in January. So getting between 12 and 16 weeks is considered very generous leave in the US, which is just crazy to think about. But at the same time, when you're in an environment where everybody is dealing with that, where everybody's going back at those times, you have a much more, I think, open culture around childcare and childcare options. And
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, it's extremely expensive in New York, where I'm from. It's just sort of mind-blowingly expensive, but it doesn't feel as loaded as, I don't know, here I felt like there was a lot of like judgment around my decision to send my daughter in particular to nursery when she was like 4 months old. But that was my option. Like I didn't really have any other options, or I didn't know about any other options. Whereas I think in the US you have more discussions around things like nanny shares, or you've got more of a conversation around it. Whereas like I think the UK, because obviously the cost involved, there's a lot of reliance on grandparents and family help, which I didn't necessarily have access to. So um yeah, it's just a different culture around childcare, I would say. But I definitely think it's insane how short the maternity leave is there. It's just crazy.
Yeah, it seems really unfair. Like it seems such a short time, but I think you're right that you pick up on the point that because here we generally get 9 months, again, depending on your employer, I think most women feel okay sending their child to nursery at 9 months, a year, kind of that period. And I think that's really interesting that you say in the US you're looking at kind of childcare at 4 months. And I think it's just, yeah, what you grow up with as a society as well, isn't it? And I think that's probably something, again, going back to you being a business owner, trying to find the childcare or find the nannies in that period. It's like another thing that you've got to work through, because it's something else you've got to source and to work out. Can be really difficult.
Yeah, just adding to that mental load that we have as parents. And I think that was a big adjustment, obviously, becoming a mom and realizing that, yeah, how much that expands in terms of what you need to be thinking about in a day.
And then just going back to the business actually again, because obviously the mental load. So when you founded MamaMade, I'm guessing that was trying to take away part of the mental load of the meal prep, because I mean, that was how I found you actually, was because I was really struggling to make healthy meals. And if I was making them, they often got rejected, and I was so fed up, like spending time making all of this healthy stuff, especially if I'd been teaching and I got back in and then they wouldn't eat it. That was how I found your meals, and I kind of loved them because I could have them in the freezer, and it made everything really easy. And I just felt like it actually fascinated me that no one else had done it in the UK, in terms of like just taking that mental load off for women. Is that where it all came about, really, from kind of just having so much on your plate, so to speak?
Yeah, exactly. Like I felt really under supported. I really found the transition to motherhood very hard, in a way that I just, yeah, again, I wasn't prepared for. I don't think anyone's truly prepared for that transition. You don't think you can be. Um, but then I was just like, this is so silly. Like, I want my daughter to have the best nutrition, the best start, but I don't want to be doing as much as this. Like, I don't feel knowledgeable enough. I don't feel like I'm coping with the kind of load of everything. Um, and as adults, there was so many options that we could turn to in terms of like meal delivery services, or like a delivery, or um, you know, yeah, anything really that you could really get that bit of support. And it just felt insane that like actually kids eat more than us, because as an adult you kind of, don't necessarily need like 3 meals and 2 snacks in the same way that a kid will need like 3 meals and 2 snacks. And um yeah, I was feeling very overwhelmed as a new mom, and it was just like I can't be the only one who's feeling this bogged down by information as well, of like, how do I know what's the right thing? How do I know when? How do I know what? Um, so that was really, yeah, a huge motivation to find a product or a system that would support parents.
And can I just ask you, because obviously I know you were focused on child nutrition, but what was your own nutrition like for your postnatal recovery? Was it something you even considered?
No, and you know what? I feel like looking back, this was 2017. I just still feel like it wasn't really talked about that much in terms of like postpartum being challenging. Like it,
Yeah,
I think about Instagram in 2017, 2018, and it was like
it was a
people talking
different
about how much
space.
they loved their babies and how much they loved being a mom, and they were just going back into their old genes within a few months, and there wasn't the same space held for challenges the way that there is now. And yeah, I don't remember. I mean, I don't even remember it being part of the conversation, like postpartum recovery. I think I had a friend who gave me a homeopathic kit that I was like, this was it. I was like popping arnica and like some other, homeopathic remedies, and that was kind of the extent of it. But I've since having Arthur in the pandemic, and seeing the change online to being more open about postpartum nutrition, I feel like,
Sorry, just once woken up.
oh no, we can wrap up. Yeah, I feel like now I want to go into this like postpartum recovery nutrition mode, because I feel like I'm still not right. Um, yeah.
There's a book actually I will send you. You might have already read it. I think it's Dr. Oscar. I can't remember his surname, but he basically writes all about postnatal depletion. And his wife
Okay.
had 3 children, and I think she might have been a doctor as well, but he is. And he couldn't believe like what happened to his wife basically after having the third child, and how much it depleted her body. And so he started to make it his kind of life's work. And so he's done this incredible book, and it's all about nutrition and supplements and doing the blood work, but really looking at how the body depletes, post having a child. So I'll send you that actually
Oh,
on
amazing.
Instagram.
Thank
Might be
you.
a
Yeah,
good one.
sounds fascinating. I was speaking to someone actually about postpartum depletion recently. I was like, I'd never heard that term. So it's great that these topics are getting some airtime now and coming to light, because yeah, hopefully that means a much different postpartum experience, and for you as well now with yours.
Yes, so my third one coming. I'm trying to kind of do everything right this time. I feel like with the first one, this one, I just didn't even think about it. And, again, thought I was going to have a super easy birth, and it didn't turn out like that. And with the second one, similar to you, it was COVID, ended up in NICU again, so just didn't think about it. So hopefully I feel like this time it's like a chance to get it right. But I still think it's really hard to kind of put yourself first in a sense and think about your recovery. I think it's a difficult thing. I'm conscious now that I'm going to have to wrap up, and for people listening,
No.
Ethan's woken up. But Sophie, I just wanted to ask if you've got any advice for mums that you would like to give, especially mums that have got their own businesses, and maybe any books that you've read or just anything that you would love to share on the end of the podcast.
Yeah, I think it's like, as you say, it's like we're so used to putting ourselves last, but sometimes the best thing you can do for your business and for your family is to not put yourself last, and to really prioritize yourself and make sure you're in that good spot, to be the best version of yourself. What have I read?
Don't worry, if I put you on the spot, don't worry.
I can think of something, but yeah, I would say that's the main thing I've learned, is obviously the proof is, from my experiences, that you lose more by not asking for help and for not putting your needs up there with the babies and with your partners and everything else.
Perfect. Thank you. And Sophie, are you happy for maybe other women just to connect with you through Instagram? I know you've got an open account, so if I put
Yeah,
your details on the podcast.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, definitely. I love speaking to other women, and especially now I'm sort of always
You're
looking to
free.
connect with people a bit more free, and looking to have interesting conversations like this. So yeah, thank you for reaching out, and it's really nice to meet you. I hope that time goes okay.
Thank you so much for coming on this evening, Sophie. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. Bye. Thank you so